Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Benson. For those of you who have just come on recently, today we're going to be covering the product overview as well as the Web Central User's Guide in ARCHIBUS. This is the first session of our ARCHIBUS BP 101 Fundamental Web Series, and we're going to be covering quite a bit of information over the first part of this half an hour. Mostly a review for those of you who've been using ARCHIBUS, but for those of you who are new to ARCHIBUS and haven't really gotten a chance to kind of see what we're all about, what we're going to start off with today is just a PowerPoint, probably for the first 25 or 30 minutes or so, that describe what ARCHIBUS is and what it does and just kind of gets you situated to the product. And that will be, I swear, the most boring part of the whole series, I hope. Because after that, what we'll do is we'll basically focus on the product and work with the product to learn how to use it. So I'll just start with the presentation here. The goals in the next half an hour for us are to be able to answer some of these following questions. Number one, you need to be able to answer what is ARCHIBUS, who uses ARCHIBUS. You should be able to talk to the different business domains that ARCHIBUS works within. You need to be able to describe some of the technology and its benefits and value. And that's different from the value of the product as a whole or the value of the product to an individual user or executive. But we'll talk about those as well. We also want you to be familiar, at least to be able to move around Web Central and the Smart Clients, the two main products. And we also want you to be able to hop into those products and be able to demonstrate some basic reporting capabilities as well as exporting capabilities so that if someone asks you a question to show part of the product, you can feel comfortable saying, yeah, no problem, let's open it up, I'll show you right where that is. And so you should be able to do some of that by the time we get done today. And we also want you, of course, to be able to understand how to look up and find things in the help text to help you help yourself as you go and learn ARCHIBUS and work with it in the future. So I'm going to start with the big picture, and those of you who have seen this before will know a lot of this already. But in terms of ARCHIBUS as a company and where we are and what we are, number one, we call ourselves the #1 global provider of infrastructure and real estate solutions. We're a scalable COTS solution for managing your facilities and running your operations, running your capital construction projects, making moves, managing moves. We do a lot of different things that to help people keep track of what goes on within their buildings. At the moment, we have over 4 million users estimated. I think it looks like this year we raised that to about 7 million users across the globe, and we're supported in over 130 countries in 30 different languages by you people, you business partners and professionals who work with ARCHIBUS. And again, we estimate that number is about 3,500 people. So that's not the size of the company per se, but in terms of the capabilities of ARCHIBUS to support its clients, we have a lot of different business partners and a lot of different professionals who help us out and do a very good job of deploying the system, teaching the system, and providing services. We also provide a broad range of products, like I said, anywhere from managing your space to managing your leases to managing construction projects, as well as looking at your energy and environmental assessments and so on. In 2011, we were included in Software Magazine's Top 500 Companies, and we're number 44. And for the past several years, we've been rated in Gartner's leadership category for integrated workplace management solutions. In terms of our focus, I wanted to show just a grouping of the applications that we share or that we work with. One is the space planning and management domain, which allows you to allocate space and track your occupancy. It also allows you to do strategic planning in terms of growth over your facilities. We also help you manage moves and occupancy so that you can keep track of where people are sitting and how much space you're actually occupying versus what you expected to be occupying. And we call those two domains part of our workplace and facility suite. We also have a real estate property suite that we work within. That's where we keep track of properties and leases, all the costs and invoices having to do with those, capital projects, capital budgets, your condition assessments, and so on. And we also work in a third quadrant that we call engineering and operations, which allows us to help you maintain your assets and equipment, and also the sustainability and functioning of the building, including things like energy management, your carbon footprint, the waste monitoring, and so on. And last, of course, is we help you manage your users and your clients and help you provide services to them. Things like allowing people to make reservations for your meeting rooms, allowing contractors to find office spaces within the building, and allowing you to manage your fleets, furniture, equipment, and all your IT cabling and connectivity. So we work within a broad array of different areas, and we have a wide variety of different clients. So people like Telefonica, IBM, NASA, Philips, Coca-Cola, MetLife, they've all used or have or are using ARCHIBUS at some point in their systems, and we have a variety of different industries that we work within. So we work within banking, state and provincial governments, city governments, education, energy companies, manufacturing, and all sorts of other different areas. And ARCHIBUS should be looked at not as a final solution for a client for any one of these products, but as a complementary system to work with other systems. So human resources can get information out of ARCHIBUS, finance can get information out of ARCHIBUS. ARCHIBUS can work with supply chain management systems, building automation systems, project management systems, other IT systems, and of course CAD and BIM, GIS, and etc. And all these things can be communicated with between ARCHIBUS and whatever system you have. So in terms of looking at ARCHIBUS as a competitor or a final solution to any one particular problem, that's probably not the best way to see ARCHIBUS. You really want to look at ARCHIBUS and all of its products as complementary to each other, but also complementary to other systems that you may have in place, whether they appear to be competitors or not. The way we distribute ARCHIBUS is through a series of channel partners. We have two different basic types of partners. One is the Solution Center, and another is the ARCHIBUS Business Partner. And we have these Solution Centers and business partners all over the world, whether it's Romania, Germany, Africa, Southeast Asia, South America, North America, etc. The list goes on, and this is the group of people who help us and support us to produce the quality product that we have. And of course, the people on the call today represent all of those business partners. But one thing that I'd like to explain about ARCHIBUS when we talk to different clients and also different partners or anyone who's interested in ARCHIBUS is that the most important thing for us really is creating a sense of community, around the globe and around the world when it comes to helping maintain facilities and manage facilities efficiently. Because basically, we're trying to do this for the betterment of the people who work with us and the people who run their facilities, and for the environment, of course. So that starts, of course, with our founder. I think he's the one who kind of starts a lot of these principles, and it runs through the organization, through the partner organizations around the world, and we hope it kind of passes on to the users and they feel that sense of community as well. So for us, the community is very important, whether we're working with a large client, small client, or whoever. And in terms of clients, it's probably important to think about the different types of clients that we have as we work through this system. We have a wide variety of different people who use our product. Some of those are executive managers, and we're finding more and more executives are using ARCHIBUS's information to make strategic decisions at different levels, because they didn't have that information before. And now with the technology the way it is today, they see that this kind of granular information that they have about their facilities can be rolled up at a very high level and produce some pretty interesting information. So executive managers all the way down to contractors or general employees use ARCHIBUS, and specifically we have people like facilities managers, space planners, CAD specialists, lease administrators, move coordinaters, and of course the IT groups now who are starting to use ARCHIBUS to keep track of equipment and furniture and IT related issues. We'll be using ARCHIBUS. So a lot of different people touch the system. And just to give you an example of why they might use a system like ARCHIBUS is if you have an executive who's interested in his real estate portfolio and the total cost of running his facilities around the world, we have things like key performance indicators and dashboards that allow them to look at those KPIs, look at the total number of buildings that they have, the total square footage, the total operating costs for all their buildings across their portfolio, whether it's a 30 building portfolio, whether it's a 100 building portfolio, or thousands of buildings around the globe. And a report like this allows them to dig into that information. We also allow director level people to look at summary dashboards as well and get at more specific information, maybe related to their buildings or related to energy or whatever it might be. And they can drill down into these reports from either a countrywide level right down into a specific building to see how much space the building has, how many people are occupying the building, how much energy it's using, and so on and so forth. But also those directors can get detailed roll-ups of the cost of the building, so you can see what exactly are running into those numbers or making those numbers up. And not only the directors, but of course, like we said, the facilities managers and everybody else who has a part in managing a building get something out of ARCHIBUS. In this case, we're showing an example of a benchmarking report for the number of the amount of square footage of space that a person can have within a building. But they can also see things like trends and information about how the building's being used over time and what departments are using the space over time, whether basically you're growing your business and you're growing the amount of space that you need, or you're decreasing that amount of space. Or you just want to find out, how often you're fixing pieces of equipment like your air handler units or your generators or things like that, things that you use to make your facilities run day to day. So we get right into the details as well of all the information that you have about the buildings. We allow you graphical analysis of your space. So, for example, a space planner might want to see a floor plan and how it's allocated out to different departments, different categories and types, and so on. And that person can use this graphical information to edit information, to make changes, and to modify items that need to be changed based on the occupancy of the space itself. Our product, and of course, works with CAD and BIM solutions to be able to integrate with those solutions so that when we are working or we're looking at a particular space, if that space changes or gets reconstructed over time, we want to make sure that our applications are working directly with the CAD applications and the BIM applications that are used to build the space out. And so it doesn't make sense for us to try to manually enter information that's already been entered into one of these applications. So again, we go back and we want to be complementary to these applications. And for the past 30 years, we've been integrating with AutoCAD and these other BIM products to be able to pull information into ARCHIBUS directly. And as it gets updated in a CAD application or a BIM application, it gets updated in ARCHIBUS's database as well. Lease administrators can use ARCHIBUS as a central repository for leasing information, leasing documents, images of buildings and land or whatever it is that they're trying to keep track of. And it also allows them to get alerts on all the important dates that they have to keep track of so they can renegotiate their leases appropriately, and also be able to understand when options are coming due and renewals will come due so they can make the best deals possible. Move coordinators will get, again, graphical layouts that will allow them to help plan their moves. IT professionals will get system plans of the system. They'll be able to use those graphical layouts of the floor plans, as well as be able to upload information about each of the IT systems in the building. And employees get something out of ARCHIBUS, but the general employee gets something out of ARCHIBUS as well. You have the ability to make meeting room reservations, to ask for coffee to be distributed, to make sure the room gets cleaned up after the fact, or to make a request for some kind of a facility service. Maybe it's transportation to the airport. Maybe it's for some kind of janitorial service to come in and clean up spilled coffee in the cafeteria. Maybe it's to make a request to get a leaky faucet fixed in the bathroom. Whatever those things are, employees, right down to the employee level, can use ARCHIBUS to get at information that they need to kind of run, to do their job every day. Not only employees, but even non-employees can use ARCHIBUS. Contractors can use ARCHIBUS, architects can use ARCHIBUS, because the technology allows you to give access to these different groups of people over the web and give it securely so that people can see just what they need to be able to see, only get at the information that they are supposed to get at. And in this case, for example, we're seeing a contractor who's able to come into the building, open up a kiosk or some other type of display, and find a seat where they can go and work for the day because they're going to be there for 2 or 3 days. So this is a very simple application for submitting and making requests for a contractor or maybe a visitor who's come to the building and needs a space. And because of this variety of users, ARCHIBUS also makes sure to give specific access to different types of people. And there's a variety of different access that you can give. You can give people menus, dashboards, or individual views, just like that contractor had for creating a booking. Here on the right hand side of the screen, there's a series of dashboards. That might be something that you could give the executive. So when they click on ARCHIBUS, all they do is they click on a link and a dashboard pops up, and they might have 2 or 3 dashboards. Someone else, an administrator of the system, may want to have 10 or 15 reports that they get out of ARCHIBUS, and so you can give them a whole series of reports with a navigational view. Or for that casual user, the employee or the contractor, the visitor who's coming into the system, you can give them a single form where they can use to just enter in one of those requests that we talked about earlier. And of course, the system can be integrated into your current your web portal. So now what I want to do is just talk about the product and value of the system. And when I say product and value, this is a little bit different than I would explain for, in a sales situation where I'm looking for a prospective client. So when I'm talking to a prospective client, we might talk about dollar amounts or time saved, or making the vice president happy, whatever we need to say to help these people do their jobs better and sell the product to them. But in terms of the actual value from a technology standpoint, that might have a different message. And the message I like to talk about in terms of ARCHIBUS is that what you're getting from ARCHIBUS is basically 5 main categories of value, and each customer gets these. I think each customer receives these, and of course this is open to interpretation and discussion as well, so you don't have to use these 5 different values, but we can talk about that. But the first one for me, when you buy ARCHIBUS, is you're getting a facilities database. That's the first value that you're going to get out of buying a product like this. It's a database that stores a series of tables and information about buildings that has been designed over the past 25 to 30 years. So it has 25 to 30 years of knowledge built into it. And it says here on the slide that there's over 400 tables and 7,000 fields in ARCHIBUS. That's because this slide is about a year old. There are now 500 tables of information and over 8,000 fields of ARCHIBUS. And the reason that provides value is because if you go into a lot of clients nowadays, what you're going to find are things still being done manually on pieces of paper in Excel spreadsheets, and there's being very little communication between different groups of people who use the same product. So I'm just going to tell you a little story here. I walked into a customer. They maintain a series of shopping centers all over the world, and they had asked ARCHIBUS in to do presentations on operations, and they have started to implement operations and maintenance for ARCHIBUS because they had to keep track of all the shops that they manage, and they had to make sure that the equipment was running correctly in those shops. Well, so when we went in to do some workshops on how the product worked, and we showed them the product and how to make a request on a broken product, or how to set up a regularly scheduled maintenance routine for the products. And at one point we said, oh, on this screen here you can see this graphical floor plan. Well, someone said, oh, we didn't know ARCHIBUS could do that. And I said, oh, well, that's kind of what ARCHIBUS does, is they do these graphical floor plans. And I said, don't you have graphical floor plans for all the leased shops that you leased out? And they said, oh yeah, we have a construction group and they have all the floor plans. And I said, oh, that's great. Where does the construction group sit? And they pointed about 30 feet away, and they said, oh, the construction group sits over in that corner. And I said, well, that's excellent. You mean you've been sitting here working with this product, trying to build up a series of buildings and floors, and you've never even realized that you could put you do your operations and maintenance with a graphical view of those floor plans? And they said no. And I said, oh, that's too bad. Let's get some of those drawings, and we'll bring them over here and we'll put the drawings in the system. And then later on, we're talking about real estate, and we're talking about leases. And I said, well, don't you have a way to keep track of all these leases? And they said, oh, yes, the real estate group keeps track of all those leases with a whole other system. And I said, well, don't they have a lot of this building information that you're using to manage the buildings with? And they said, yes, they have a lot of that building information. I said, well, where do they sit? Well, they were sitting in another corner about 10 feet away. And that was a group that was using real estate system. So they had the same information about buildings and floors that could be used in the ARCHIBUS system. And it kind of went on like that. So we found there was about 4 or 5 groups that were sitting on the same floor that never communicated with each other about the buildings that they managed, even though all 4 or 5 groups used the same buildings and the same information about the buildings to help them do their jobs. So the idea was, well, it doesn't really make sense to have all these people building Excel spreadsheets and Oracle databases and other types of databases, Word documents that have all this information in it, but not be able to share that information. And so that's what ARCHIBUS does first, is number one, allows everyone to put one piece of information in one place and allow everybody else to kind of share that piece of information. In this case, it was a building, information about a building and a floor in a building. It's pretty simple, but everyone had a different piece of information and no one was really explaining it. So for me, the database is the number one value that you get when you buy the ARCHIBUS product. You don't have to recreate those spreadsheets or recreate those data tables because they already exist. You just have to start using them right away. The next piece of value that you get when you get the product is this CAD and BIM integration. If you're going to manage buildings and manage spaces, one of the key things you need to know is how much space you have, how many buildings do you have, and to be able to integrate with the actual software that's used to model those buildings gives you a lot more power of information over people when you're when you're renegotiating leases in those buildings, because now you don't have to rely on negotiations or negotiated areas. You know exactly how much the areas are because you're actually connecting to architectural elements that describe or design those spaces. And of course, you can always question how accurate those are, but anyway, the CAD and BIM integration is another piece because it's just another tool that allows us not to have to re-enter manually information that already exists in another system. Next is ARCHIBUS provides a web-based interface, which means that you can go from a facilities group managing facilities data to an entire organization, and anyone in the organization can connect to that information through the web because all they need is a web browser. And so with the web browser as a tool, people can get that information and see, here's the rooms that we have. Here's how much square footage we have. Here's the conference room that I'm looking for, and I can see an image of that conference room, and I can click on the resources, and I can realize there's coffee and whatever in the conference room. And so that information that was managed by 3 or 4 people historically is now being shared with everybody else, and that's where people are beginning to realize there's a lot of information that's valuable there. And so the other thing that the web-based interface allows us to do is to build in some automation into the system. And so that brings us our next value, which is your business processes, best practices. ARCHIBUS comes out of the box, again, with about 20 to 30 years of experience in how to manage buildings and facilities and infrastructure. And we know some of those basic processes that people follow to do that. So we build those right into the system. And not only that, we allow you to build your own processes into the system so that you can have multiple people working on the same data in a way that makes sense, in a way that makes sure that the data gets in correctly, and make sure that you have approvals, confirmations, you have someone who can issue it out to the right group of people to get updated, and those people can update the information and then sign off on the information as well. So the business processes that are built into the system also provide a lot of value for different companies, because in a lot of companies your business processes rely on emails and phone calls and kind of the way things always have been. And lastly, all of the ARCHIBUS technology is highly customizable and easily integrated. It's open. We have an open API. That doesn't mean you have to go and customize it, but it means that if you wanted to add a field, or if you wanted to change the way a view works or a report works, it's very simple. You can change it however you'd like. You don't need to stick with whatever comes out of the box, even though we're having people head in that direction. Most people want what's out of the box nowadays, but the reality is they also want a little bit of change. So in terms of the benefits of those things, I talked a lot about those things. But in terms of the benefits of the database, you can save time on the development of the metadata. You can save time on manually inputting drawing data into your database or your spreadsheets. You can save time and effort spent communicating to various levels in the organization. You don't have to rely on emails and printing documents out on paper. Now everybody can access the same information just with a browser. You can also reduce that reliance on spreadsheets and emails and phone calls, and of course you can reduce the need to develop new technologies every time you want to add, let's say, a mobile solution or a web-based solution or something like that. ARCHIBUS is open to all those different things. So I'm going to just take a little break here and see if there's any questions at this point. If not, we'll go ahead and keep moving. I don't see any chats up. I don't see any questions being raised. I think most of you probably already know some of this stuff, but it's just kind of it's a nice review. And there are no questions, so we'll go ahead and move on. So now what we're going to do is kind of get into the real concepts behind this product overview that we're discussing today. And this is where we kind of jump into the document. There's a few things you really should know about ARCHIBUS before you start using it, before you start talking to people about it. One is there's some, we kind of consider there to be about three basic user types when we're talking about using the different products. And there are 3 products that go along with those user types. However, there's only one database that all those products and all those users talk to. So no matter what one user does in the application or whatever application he's using, other users are going to be able to see that too, because the information is all going into one place. So if we talk about user types, And we've already talked about all the different types of users there are. But those executives, those project managers, those facilities managers, those are really represented as what we call, or we refer to openly as users, or the end client, or the end user. So those people all fall into one category of user. They're probably using the web or some similar type of application to access the data. Then there's a whole other group of users who are called administrators. And these are the people who are responsible for setting up the system, making sure the data exists, making sure the system's running and configured correctly. And those are people like database administrators, system developers, and other IT professionals who are going to make sure that your system is running correctly. And then the third type of user is that CAD or BIM specialist, and those are going to be people who are familiar with those building applications like AutoCAD or Revit or AutoCAD Mechanical, whatever it is that they're using, ARCHICAD. Those people are going to be another type of users. And so what we find is after we've broken all these different types of people into these three major categories, what we've developed are three products that each get to use. And you can see here on the screen there's a description of the products. One is called Web Central, one is called the Smart Client, and then the third product is called the extension for AutoCAD and Revit. And all three products talk to a single database. So like I said before, a lot of the users use a product called Web Central. That's that web-based application that requires you to have an internet browser to get at the data. It gives you access to those charts and graphs and dashboards that we talked about earlier. So any user who has a browser can use this product called Web Central. And Web Central gives them access to all sorts of different data in a variety of different formats. And you can see just on the screen you have pie charts and graphs, you have basic grids of numbers, mapping views, and different types of reports that you can call up. The second type of user, the administrator, is someone who wants not really to deal with all the pretty results of using the system, but needs to be able to manage the system, manage the users, manage the data, make sure the data is clean and that it's good. And so what we have for that person is a product called the Smart Client. And the Smart Client allows you to, basically it looks like a spreadsheet, but it allows you to work with the data in a way that in bulk, basically, so that you can copy and paste data, you can manage data like you would in a spreadsheet, but you don't have to be a database administrator. You don't have to have all the database tools to use to update information or to write information to the database. So the Smart Client kind of allows you the power of a database, but with the functionality of a spreadsheet. And it's kind of nice to be able to get in and look at those 500 or 600 tables without having to understand how to write a SQL script or something like that. And then the third product that we have is basically a plugin that we call the extension for CAD or Revit. And that application allows you to look at architectural drawings or architectural models in Revit or AutoCAD, and then manipulate those drawings so that the data that you work with in the drawing or the model gets input into the database directly. So the same data that we're working with in the Web Central or Smart Client products also gets manipulated with the extension for CAD and Revit, and you can update information either here or here or here, all depending on what type of user you are. All three applications share the same type of navigation tool. So once you learn the navigation tool, which we call the Process Navigator, you're going to be able to use either Web Central or the Smart Client or the AutoCAD. But the reality is that no one person really uses all three applications on a regular basis. Typically, your administrators will figure out which product they want to use. The executive will probably not do anything more than use a dashboard or a quick chart or report, and then the facilities managers, they'll use whatever they need to. And you'll start finding that people will start using whatever product makes most sense for them. So when we're first learning the application, it becomes a little bit confusing to see all three products, but as you get used to using the system, you'll find that you'll just use that one product that makes sense for you. And however you use it, you'll use the navigator to navigate to different processes and tasks that you can do within the product. So if you notice, I just want to describe some vocabulary for everybody so that we can stay on the same page as we describe how to move around the system. And the vocabulary has to do with these markings here that I have called A, B, C, and D. Well, basically, on the top of the navigator, you have something that we call a domain. And there are about 8 or 9 domains in ARCHIBUS. And so when you get into the system, you'll see a listing of those domains. Those are the things like space planning and management, real estate portfolio management, asset management, enterprise move management, capital project management. And what you'll do is, depending on what you use, if you use more than one, which is probably not too often, but if you're going to use more than one, you'll see a listing of these different domains. And you'll have to go choose which area of the product you want to work within. In that case, you'll click on the little arrow next to the domain, make the click, and the next thing the navigator does is present you with a series of applications. This is represented by the B here. So under the space planning and management domain, there may be 2 or 3 applications. In this case, we've clicked on the space inventory and performance application to see how space within a building is being used, and those applications then are what we license as products. So when you buy ARCHIBUS, you actually buy applications, not domains. That allows us to sell you bits and pieces of the product so that you can buy and you can configure a product that's right for you for the right price without having to buy the entire set of applications, because you may not use all those applications. The processes then the applications then are further broken down into individual processes that we recommend you follow for different roles of people. So, for example, the Space Inventory Performance application has a process called room inventory. And room inventory is typically used by the space planner or the facilities manager to keep track of the different types of space and how it's used. So, underneath the process, we see a series of tasks represented by the D here. And the tasks are what a person or an individual is going to click on every day to look at reports, to run jobs, to run calculations, or to enter and manipulate data. So each of these different tasks on the navigator, whether it's the define rooms task or the draw rooms, the set gross areas, each of those is going to do something in the system and provide you with a window to look at. But all 3 applications use the process navigator. And you can see the coloring is a little bit different, but the basic way they work is the same. You drill down from a domain to a application to a process, and you click on a task. Now, having said that, most users are not going to have to click on or drag down to anything. Most users should have a process that they've set up or has been set up for them that you as a business partner may do, and those users will sign into the system and just see the tasks that they're going to use every day, because most people don't do capital planning and space planning or lease administration and environmental assessments. So most people are going to be kind of using ARCHIBUS for a specific need, and in that case you don't need to have to run through all these different menu options. Next, all of ARCHIBUS, whether it's all the things that you do in ARCHIBUS, we call a project. So when I say all the things we do, what I mean is ARCHIBUS consists of, like we talked about already, a database, but it also consists of all the AutoCAD files and Revit files that you're going to use to represent your buildings. It's going to represent all the different files that you want to keep track of, maybe your leasing documents, your material safety data sheets that you have on hand for all your toxic chemicals. It may be all the files that you use for your mobile applications. All those things together make up what we call a project. Next, the purpose of a project is to make sure that you have the architecture in place to support business goals. So like we've been talking about, we've been describing all these different users. We've been describing databases and web applications and AutoCAD applications and potentially mobile applications. Well, what the system is designed to do is allow each user, whether it's and each application that they want to use, to develop the data that they need for themselves, but also then to share that data with the rest of the community. And basically it goes into, you have all these things that we call authors and subscribers who are using their different applications to get that information, and they're building all sorts of facilities information in different domains like portfolio administration or lease administration, energy management. And all that information rolls up to different levels in the organization. So you have strategic levels, you have operational levels, so that at a very high level in the organization, you should be able to look at all your facilities in real estate and start setting some goals for how you want to manage your infrastructure portfolio. So things like, let's say as a company, you want to reduce carbon emissions by 30%, or you want to reduce the cost per head count by 10%, or you want to reduce the square footage per head count by 10%. You could make statements like that and strategic missions like that for the organization, and then track them to make sure that over time you're meeting these deadlines. The U.S. government now in 2006 signed off on an executive order to make sure that all federal agencies reduce their portfolio by 20%. The problem was the federal government and the federal agencies didn't exactly know what they had to begin with. So it's very difficult to reduce something by 20% if you don't know what that something started with. So one of the things that you do use ARCHIBUS for, and you have all these people working on the system for, is to get at that very low-level detail of data, so that when you say, I'm going to reduce my infrastructure by 20%, you know that you started with a certain amount at the beginning of your process, and then in 4 or 5 or 6 years, you can say, oh, yep, now we're 20% low, we've met our requirement, and that's the kind of the goal of ARCHIBUS as a system within the organization. We do that in a variety of different ways. So when we talked about projects earlier and we're having all these people using the system, this means that we have to have some kind of an architectural backbone to support all these people and all these different things they're doing. So basically, we talked about ARCHIBUS being made up of a server. Well, typically in an IT situation, you have a set of databases or a single database server that's going to hold your database, and then you have a series of web application servers for the web-based technology, and that web-based technology is going to allow your Web Central to work. It's going to allow the Smart Client to work. It's going to allow your mobile devices to connect to the system, and then in return, those point to the database and allow those different products to update the database. They also allow you to use things like web services to integrate with your other systems, like your Microsoft, your Oracle, your Sage, your HRP systems, so that you can feed information out to those systems and also gather information back from them. And there's a variety of different ways to connect to the system, whether you're using your desktop, your PC, your tablets, and so on. So the system can be very complicated. It can be very simple as well, right down to we can have an individual user doing all this on a single PC, and that's basically what I'm doing here today, which you'll see in a few minutes. Or you can have this system set up as a global organization with people all over the world working on ARCHIBUS in different languages, in different currencies, and so on. So now what we want to do is, that's kind of the overview of the system that I like to give to all my students. Now what I'd like to do is kind of start hopping into the product a little bit so we can see what the product looks like. And this will be more of the meat and potatoes of tonight's homework. So we're going to start with some basics that you need to know about ARCHIBUS before you even kind of jump in and start using it. So the first thing is, and what we do with our documents is we always set up a set of requisite skills that you need to know. And one of the requisite skills you need to know to use ARCHIBUS is just how to kind of navigate around the page that you see. So for example, when we open up the Smart Client, we have an application with a little ribbon on the top, and on the left-hand side we'll see the Process Navigator, and on the right-hand side we'll see all of the data that's associated with that navigator, with that task that we've chosen on the navigator. So just in terms of vocabulary, when we look at the top of the screen of the Smart Client or the CAD extension, you're going to see what we call a ribbon. And the ribbon is where a lot of your different tools and commands are. On the left-hand side of the page, you'll see a Process Navigator. That's where we're going to get at and be able to drill down into all the different tasks that we use in the system. And on the right-hand side of the screen, that's where we're going to actually see the data that we're going to use to work with the system. So that's requisite skill number 1. Requisite skill number 2 is, for most of these products, because it's a web-based application and it relies on web services, you'll have to sign in and sign out of the product just like you do any other application. So in most cases, you'll locate the product, and then you'll key in your username and the password and hit OK, and that will get you into using the system. You'll have to have a valid password to be able to allow you to get into ARCHIBUS. And of course, one of the things you don't want to skip out on is learning how to use the help text. So that's the other requisite skill. So what I want to do here now is just take a look at the products, and also I want to walk you through a basic procedure for using the 3 different applications. I'm going to show you basically a couple procedures. One is for installing the product for demonstrations and development. The other is how to explore the Smart Client so you become familiar with the Smart Client and what it can do. And lastly, we're going to look at a procedure for exploring the web-based products. So again, you can become familiar with Web Central and what it does. And we're going to do all these things that we have on the screen here. Things like opening reports, using the filters, creating the views of data. And I've got in the presentation some slides on exercises that you'll be doing tonight. So I'll just leave it there and we'll come back to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sign out of the presentation, and I'm going to flip over and take a look at our first application, which is called the Smart Client. Now, the Smart Client is the one that we described as being used by the administrators, and I'm going to just sign out of the Smart Client first just to make sure that I'm going to log into the system and you can see me do that. So I said the first prerequisite skill was that you know how to log in to one of the systems. Well, the Smart Client, before I even do that, I'm going to just minimize this, and I'm going to minimize the PowerPoint here and show you how I start off with a basic screen. The Smart Client is an application that gets installed directly on a PC. It's a thin application. It only takes about 30 seconds to install, and what it does is it points, just like a browser points, to your URL that you've created for your system. So what I do to open up the Smart Client is we just click on the Smart Client, and when we do that, we open up this view. And to actually start using it, we'll click on Sign In. I'm just going to pause this for just a second. And when you get to the Sign In screen, you can see at the top that it's pointing, the system is pointing to your ARCHIBUS installation, which of course is a web-based installation. So you'll see a very similar URL that you'd have to a web page. If this is the system that you use all the time, you'll simply go in, type in your username and password, like I'm doing here, AFM, and here's my password, AFM. I can say remember my credentials, so next time I sign in, it's going to remember the same user and password that I signed in here, and it's going to tell me how often I have left on my license, and I can just hit OK to sign in. Before I do that, I just want to show you what would happen if you had different sets of applications or different sets of instances of ARCHIBUS. So for example, most clients will have what they call a production project, and then also a development or a testing project. And they may have 2 or 3. And so what you'll typically do is you'll have the production project, which is the project that you use every day, in one location, but then you'll separate that from the development locations and the testing locations so that you can work in different locations and make changes to the system without affecting your actual production system. If that's the case and you have different URLs to use, then you can simply select the URL that you want to use for the system. And if you've used other URLs in the past, you'll see a list of those URLs to those different systems. Or you can simply key in the address of the system that you want to use. In this case, my system is called Taurus. My birthday was in April, so that's why we have Taurus here. And we type in the address that you're given for your production environment. You hit OK, and now you get the same screen. You'll see that when we sign into the public system for training, you'll actually have a couple different projects. One's called the Global Dataset, and the other one's called HQ. But once you get to this basic page, you can just sign in and hit OK. And that's all you have to do to actually get access to the database and the data in the system. Now you see on the left-hand side we have access to our Process Navigator. So in terms of using the Smart Client, one of the things I can do is actually log into the Smart Client, click on the domain that I want to click on. In this case, it was the Space Planning and Management domain. You'll notice that I have some information about that domain as I hover over the domain. And then I can see the applications down below the domains. And I can see 3 different applications. Well, if I click on Space Inventory and Performance, that brings me into all my roles or processes that have been created. In this case, I'll go to the process called Room Inventory Setup and Manage. And that's where I can go in and set up all my different rooms and other information. So I just want to show you today how to kind of get at information using the Smart Client, and also how to report on the information. So the simple way to do this is simply to click on one of the tasks, like a task called Draw Rooms, and that's going to bring up some of the data in the system. You'll see as I clicked on Draw Rooms, the system goes out to the database, finds the data, and pulls up the information. And here I have a series of what we call rooms in the system. These are just representations of all the spaces that we keep track of. So we have a listing of buildings here with the different floors, different rooms, categories, types, and standards, and so on. And now I can use my ribbon to hide the navigator and just work with the data. And so if you want to just make a basic report of data, it's pretty simple in that you can just choose the fields that you want to use from the database to show on the screen. And you do that by clicking on the button called Fields. And here you have a listing of fields that exist in this table that we call rooms. So for example, I'm currently looking at my building, floor, room category, room type, and so on. If I just want to see area and I don't want to see drawing name and other information like, let's say, the department or type or so, and I did want to see the, let's say, maybe capacity of each room, or the count or the cost of each space, then we can click on those fields that we want to see, or we can even drag them over using a drag and drop function and hit OK. And as we press OK, we change the fields that we see on the screen. Now the other thing I can do in the Smart Client that's a little bit faster if I've got the right fields is just to modify and drag rooms and drag fields from one place to another. So I can actually put division over here, I can move room area over here, so that now I can see my room codes, areas, names, what other piece of information that I want to use. So this is kind of a nice way of working with the data in a data table. Once you've got a report that you like, you can also very quickly get at this information or give this information to someone else. And there's a couple ways to report on basic information in the Smart Client. The first way is just to click on this button called Report. When I click on the report, it brings up a little job that's going to create a Microsoft Word document based on the fields that I've got on the display. So if I want to go print off this set of fields for a meeting and I want to bring this to show people some of the details of my spaces and my buildings, what I can do is open up this link when it's done getting created, and I can open up the Word document, save it as a PDF, print it out, or do whatever I want with it as I need. And my system right now is just running a little routine here. I don't know if that's going to run quickly or not. My laptop probably is slowing down. It is afternoon here in London, and usually after lunch my laptop gets tired. If it doesn't open up right away, I'm just going to keep on moving, and we'll come back to this later when it does open up. But I've got to worry about time a little bit, so we're going to keep moving. But basically what would happen is that's going to take those fields of data and produce a Microsoft Word document with those fields. And here it is. It's popped up. I click on Open. And now I've got a listing or a Word document with all the information that I was just showing in the Smart Client. And if I zoom in here, you can see some of the data and how it looks. Just hit OK, and there's the document that I can now print off and take with me to a meeting if I want. And these documents, by the way, can be modified however you want. So here I've got a logo from ARCHIBUS. If I don't want that logo, obviously I can change that, or I can create a template that we always use with our client logo. And you can change the default title as well. You can change the colors and the styles of these templates as well. But basically, out of the box, the Smart Client is able to show you fields of data and then report on those fields of data. So that's the Word document. The other way you can very quickly kind of just get at this information is to export the information with the Export button. So I've clicked on the Export button, and that's going to do something very similar to the Report button. It's going to create an Excel file of all the data that we have in the Smart Client. And again, I think my system's going to run a little bit slow here because it's trying to keep up with WebEx and the PowerPoint and everything else. And while that runs again, I'm going to go back and we'll take a look at, actually I think it's going to show up here. There it goes. So there's the Excel spreadsheet with the same information and the same type of capabilities that we had, but now we're using Excel. If you wanted to modify or play around with data, you could, or print that out, whatever you wanted. However, a lot of people use Excel when they really don't have to, because the other thing you can do, the other way you can report with a Smart Client is actually to use these 1D and 2D analysis buttons. If you sort the information by, let's say, room standard, for example, and you want to click on, and you want to see all your spaces by a particular type of space, you can click on the 1D button, and that actually creates a summary report for you of all of your rooms by room standard. And you can do this for cost per area or whatever else you want to have. But I'm just going to quickly run this 1D report here. And here's the report that was produced. By simply clicking on 1D, the system or Smart Client automatically creates a report for you of all your total areas by the room standard. It gives you the capacity of the room, and it also gives you the number of rooms that are that fall underneath that standard. So by default, the Smart Client will actually summarize all the numerical fields that exist in the view that you're looking at. And not only that, you can actually export this report to Excel, and you'll see in a minute that this is actually a Web Central style version of a report. You can actually put this on Web Central as well. So if you wanted all your users to be able to get at this report, you could put it on, you could make it a task on their menu. But if I click on Excel there, I'll get an Excel report, which I'm not going to do now, just in the interest of time. And we'll keep moving. So very simply, the Smart Client is kind of a powerful tool to show you some information about your system, to get at data, and then to very quickly kind of get data out of the system in the form of a Word document or an Excel report, or even a Web Central style two-dimensional or one-dimensional view. So that's kind of a simple overview of the Smart Client product. Now what I want to do as well is show you how to use the Web Central product. So if I minimize Smart Client and I open up Web Central, you'll see this is just a browser. This is just Internet Explorer with that same URL that I used for the Smart Client and a login page similar to a login page that you see on any website. So to access the data here, the same data, again, I'll type in my username and password and sign in. And now what I'll do is I'll access that same information, the same buildings, floors, and rooms that I was just looking at earlier, and I'll see that in ARCHIBUS here in Web Central. You'll see on the left-hand side of the page, I get the same process navigators with the same set of domains. Again, I click on the Space Planning and Management domain, click on that same Space Inventory and Performance application, go down to the same Room Inventory Setup and Manage report, and now because I'm probably a different style of user, not an administrator, but a facilities manager or a space planner or someone like that, then I'm going to have a different way of looking at the data. So if I click on a similar report, like the Defined Rooms report, what it's going to show me are all my rooms, but it's going to show me my rooms in terms of a way that I can go in and manage those rooms after they've been set up and modified by the administrator. So in this case, again, I'm going to just hide the Process Navigator, and I get a form that looks like this with a series of sites, buildings, floors, and rooms. And you can see that, again, I can drill into the data. So I have a series of sites here, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and down below I have a few more. If I wanted to drill into a particular site, I can simply click on the drill down here on the left-hand side of the screen, and I can see all the buildings in my sites. Here I have an example of the HQ building. It has a series of floors, and I can click on a floor and see all the rooms that are on that floor. Now if I click on the site itself, the name, I'll see information about that site appear on the right-hand side of the screen. If I click on the building, you'll notice that same tab shows the building information, and if I click on the floor, it moves to a floor and then to a room. So anytime you're working in Web Central, you can get at a variety of different information all from one screen, and you'll notice at the top of the screen there's this thing called a filter. If I wanted to limit what I saw to just that one building, I can key in a site here and just limit all my sites to ones that are called market. And now I've got Now I've got a limited view of the data for just that one particular building, or those two buildings, and I can now work with that one building at a time. So now this is a different type or style of looking at the same data, but I can still go in and make a name for this room and save the data, and whatever I've saved now is going to show up under the Smart Client, and I've switched the Smart Client, by the way, and it will update. I'm going to switch back just to make sure I get the right room name. This is the first floor of room 124. I'm going to go back to the Smart Client, sorry. Choose the floor code called 1, and there's that change that I just made in the Smart Client, or in the Web Central product. So you can see that whether I'm using the Smart Client as an administrator or whether I'm using with a Web Central product, we're updating the same data. And I'm going to step back into the Web Central product now, and I'm going to show you some other types of functionality that comes with this web-based product. I'm going to move up to the menu, the next menu. I'm going to click on the little arrow key. And then I'm going to choose to run the go in as a space manager and click on the space manager process. And I'm going to run a report called, actually I think I'm going to go to the reporting process and choose a report called Room Highlights by Department. Now, a lot of the Web Central screens work the same way. Once I've gotten used to clicking on a task on the Process Navigator, I like to hide the Process Navigator, but then you basically work with the filter at the top of the screen, and you choose what you want to do on the left-hand side of the screen. In this case, if I want to work with the same building again, I can go to that same floor, floor 01, and in this particular view, I'm seeing not only data, but I'm seeing the floor plan that goes along with that data. So this particular floor is not particularly well laid out, so I'm going to go ahead and choose another one. Let's call it the 18th floor. And now I see I've got on my system data for the building, information about the floor plan itself, and then down below I have a summary report of all the rooms on that floor and the departments to which they are assigned. And I can actually go in and work with this application as well. So if I want to print off this information, I can use the same types of tools for printing reports to Microsoft Word or Excel in some cases. On this screen, there's no Excel option. There's just the option for a Word document. But if I wanted to, for example, in this case, drill in to a different area, and I'm just going to lose the filter there, and I'm going to remove some of these different, what we call panels. You can actually print off exactly what you see here on the screen into a Word report. And as the system does that, I'm going to go ahead and continue talking about Web Central a little bit. There's a lot of these different types of reports in Web Central, whether it's a drawing report, whether it's a report of data, or whether it's an editable form. They all work kind of the same. Once you get in and you learn how to navigate and use the filter and create information, you can go in and make all sorts of changes based on your user type, your role, and the function that you're trying to do. And here the screen has popped up, and I've chosen I can now see that I can see just a view of the drawing that I wanted to see, that I zoomed in on. And if I wanted to see this whole report printed out to a document, I could actually use the feature on this page called a paginated report, and that would send it off to another report. But the goal here is just to learn how to kind of navigate around Web Central, how to move in and out of different areas, how to use the system. Lastly, what I wanted to do today was talk a little bit about some of the background data that you need for Web Central. So I'm going to hop back into just our second presentation here, and I'll put these presentations online after the fact. But basically, if we want to talk a little bit more about Web Central and using it, one thing that you should know how to do, or you should understand about your system, is your basic background data, and also how to create requests in Web Central. Because as a user, not as an administrator or as a power user or whatever, as a user, there are some things that you can do with Web Central every day that are pretty important to know. First thing you need to understand, though, is that Web Central can be set up in a variety of ways. You can have a single view assigned to you, and that's the only view you ever see. It may be simply a view just to create a request for maintenance. It may be a view to create a reservation for a room or book a room. Or you can have a series of a single dashboard or multiple dashboards assigned to you so that all you ever see are these dashboarding reports. Or you can have the entire navigator assigned to you so you can get at different items. And what you can then do in the system is build your basic data. And all of ARCHIBUS is based on these 6 data tables, the first 3 of which are called sites, buildings, and floors. And one of the things you use Web Central to do is develop those sites, buildings, and floors. And I'm just going to show you how to do that tonight, now, because tonight's homework is going to be to enter in another set of tables that all of our customers use called business units, divisions, and departments. And tonight as well, what you'll do after you get used to that is creating some geographical data. So that's that presentation. I'm going to sign out of there. Once you get familiar with Web Central, you just have to build all this background data. So I've now clicked on background data, and I'm going to come into this task called define locations. And just build some basic background data for ARCHIBUS. Now, if you had just set up your system, this is all you have to do to get started with the system. First, you can click on Add a New Site, click on the site, type in a site like A1, and the red star field is all you need to fill out. But I'm going to just fill out the description as well so it makes sense. Click on Save. Whoops. And it tells me in this case, oh, I've already done this exercise. I've got to make a different record. So the system keeps me up to date with these types of things. So I'm going to call this a 01. Oops, I have one of those as well. We'll call this BP 101. How about that? And click on Save. And now what you're going to see in our list of sites on the left-hand side of the page is a site called BP 101. That's the site we just created. And now every site needs to have a building, at least one, with a building code. Now I'm going to call this building 01. Maybe I'll just make it even simpler and call it B001. And again, all I have to have is that basic piece of information and a name, and we'll save that information. And then for that building, I can set up a single floor, and this will be the basis of our facility system, is a site, building, and a floor. And now tonight, what I'm going to have you do for an exercise is log into Web Central and do the same thing that we did just here, which is to add some facilities background data using these edit forms and the filters that we've talked about to update information. So what you're going to do tonight is you're going to create a division, a department, a business unit, as well as a country to put your organization and all your buildings in. So if you go ahead and follow the exercises in the documents that we discussed earlier in the presentation, you can go ahead and follow that for tonight. And then what we'll do is we'll take a look at, if you're using the public site, over here, the 63, 117, 216, 159 site, you can use the global data set to enter your information. And what I want you to do is, because everybody's signing in as the same user, you're going to have to make different, you can't do the same exercise. So what I'd like you to do when you add your divisions and departments and your countries is just add your initials to the beginning of the building. So for example, my name is Sean Benson. And if I want to create a new building, building 1, I'm going to type in a building called BL01-SBB. And that way, when you guys are all using the system to run your exercises, you don't run into the problem where you're all trying to create the same site, same building, same country, and so on. So please go ahead and use your initials. If that doesn't work, you may want to include your country. And what we'll do tonight is we'll take a look at all the results, and then in the morning we'll go through a review of the exercise, and we'll answer any questions that you might have had as you've gone through the document and done your exercises. So for that's going to end today's session, and I'll post post these presentations up for you to do the exercises if you need to. And before we finish, I just want to make sure that everybody understands what they're going to do next. So I'll just put up one extra page here, which is going to be our review for tomorrow. So tomorrow, when we come back in, we're going to start at 10:45 for the review. If you want to just start, if you just want to learn about the Smart Client, you can start at 11 o'clock. And tonight, what I want you to do is go through these two documents, develop a report of employees by building, explore a couple of the product domains like real estate and space and so on, enter some geographical data, create a move request, create a work request, and then we'll talk about doing the same types of things in the Smart Client tomorrow. Now, if there are any questions, I'm going to end the recording now, but if there are any questions, we can go ahead and sit and answer those questions and have any discussion that you'd like. It doesn't look like I've got any questions at the moment, so thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow, 10:45, same time, same place.